Kisuke Urahara is quite rightly dubbed as the smartest character within the world of Bleach. However, even he was left speechless after being blamed for Aizen's Hollowification experiments. This is a process involving a hollow soul being placed into a normal soul so that the boundary between the two can be broken in order to create a all-new powerful hybrid being. Hollowification was initially proposed to power up the soul of a Shinigami. However, they were unable to control the resultant hollowified Shinigami, so the entire process was abandoned and frankly outlawed by the Shinigami. The process of Hollowification is a key concept to understand the story and contrasting beliefs of both Urahara and Aizen. As Aizen had first invented the Hokyoku in order to successfully perform Hollowification, he had tested the abilities of his Hokyoku 101 years ago on several members of the Gotei 13, who would later become the Vizards. Urahara, exiled and abandoned by the Soul Society, had no choice but to devise his own method to reverse the Hollowification and to prevent the death of the Vizards. It's apparent that Urahara solves most of the issues directly or indirectly caused by Aizen's twisted actions. In this video, I want to dive deep into the process of Hollowification and understand how Urahara was able to prevent the deaths of not only the Vizards but also Masaki Kurosaki, who was a Quincy that was undergoing Hollowification. A huge thank you to the sponsor of this video, Wondershare UniConverter. Have you ever wanted to make YouTube videos but have no idea about converting or editing? Wondershare UniConverter is an all-in-one application allowing you to convert, compress, and edit your videos, and it's available now via my link in the description. I often struggle with material to use in my videos or with opening certain video formats. Thankfully, UniConverter allows you to convert your video files quickly into more than 1,000 different formats, enabling you to freely edit or watch your videos. We are all aware of how many episodes long-running shonen anime can have, but thankfully UniConverter also helps to compress and store every episode within your media library, while at the same time retaining the quality of the video. Now this saves you a ton of storage space and it makes it easier to share your anime episodes with your friends. UniConverter also has its own subtitle editor, helping you to add subtitle files to your videos or even automatically generate subtitles via voice recognition. This is super handy if you have anime without subtitles that you want to watch translated into your desired language. With AI features like voice remover and noise remover, you can enhance your audio recordings and create your own YouTube videos like mine. Most importantly, UniConverter makes it easier to watch anime by compressing, converting, and adding subtitles. So once again, I want to thank Wondershare UniConverter for sponsoring this video, so be sure to check out this amazing software via the link in the description or the pinned comment at the bottom of this video. Now let's get back to the topic of the video. A hollowified soul is formed when a normal soul is forcibly combined with a hollow soul. This typically results in an uncontrollable monster. Hollowification disrupts the boundary between the souls so that the two can merge, but the original soul usually ends up becoming so unstabilized that its boundary with the outer world is also disrupted. Now if this is allowed to progress, then the original soul will self-destruct via a process called soul suicide. Soul suicide, because of Hollowification, is not as severe within Shinigami who are hollowified. The real problem arises when Hollowification is attempted with a Quincy. In chapter 552, we learn that hollows are poisonous to Quincy. So if a Quincy is hollowified, then it will weaken the individual's spiritual pressure and almost always lead to soul suicide. Now this is even before Hollowification can occur. Now this is why Masaki had felt sick and was dying, as opposed to the Vizards who had manifested hollow masks immediately and were pretty much hollowified right after being infected. Now I'll talk more about soul suicide and how Urahara was able to prevent it with the Vizards and Masaki later on in the video. But going back to Hollowification, when this process is successfully performed and the resultant hybrid being is in full control of themselves, then they will gain a great deal of power. Now this is because an inner hollow ends up being formed, as well as a hollow mask that appears on the individual's face, as demonstrated by the Vizards and even Ichigo. Now during the Arrancar arc, we learned about uncontrolled Hollowification via Ichigo, who after having activated his own Shinigami powers had struggled to control his inner hollow. He had sought help from Shinji and the other Vizards who had helped him to control his inner hollow and prolong the time that he is able to manifest his hollow mask, so that he can make use of the incredible power boost that Hollowification grants to the user. Now understandably, we have several questions during this portion of the series. Firstly, just who are Shinji and the other Vizards? How did they learn to control their hollow powers? And the more important question, secondly, secondly, what is the cause of a inner hollow manifesting like it does with Ichigo on the Vizards? Now, the answers to these questions are revealed during some very fascinating flashback arcs. The Turn Back the Pendulum arc takes us over 100 years into the past, as we learn about how the Vizards were first hollowified. Now, this is similar to a zombie outbreak, as hollowification is depicted during this flashback as an infection that can pass on to others via their wounds. If the individual has large enough spiritual pressure, hollowification will occur if they are infected, as opposed to them dying if they have low spiritual pressure. Now, after they are infected and hollowification begins, the individuals start to convulse and cough up spiritual energy in the form of a white liquid, which starts to take the shape of a hollow mask on their face, as they also lose their sense of sanity, as they are effectively transformed into a raging berserker. Hollowification is known to be sped up if the person is getting more stressed and agitated. Now, by the end of the infection, the Shinigami has become a human hollow hybrid that begins to attack anyone indiscriminately. Aizen was responsible for infecting the Shinigami and making them hollowify. He had done this in order to test the limits of his Hokyoku after he had absorbed the souls of countless citizens of Rukongai in order to perfect his Hokyoku and to strengthen its power. Now, in a similar fashion, Aizen's creation called White was also able to hollowify others after biting them. Now, we learn more about this hollow white during the Everything But the Rain flashback arc. In chapter 532, we see that it poisons the target after biting them, which ultimately leads to the individual undergoing hollowification. White was a hollow created from a dead Shinigami. In chapter 533, Tozen explains that when the hollow had bitten Masaki, it had self-destructed, meaning that it had completed the hollowification stage, thus beginning the metastasized stage. White was designed in order to target and hollowify a desired Shinigami. Now, Tozen considers the hollow to be a failure after it had deliberately targeted Masaki, who is a pure-blooded Quincy. Aizen, on the other hand, is quite optimistic about this outcome. He is aware that the hollow had strayed away from its goal, but this may end up resulting in something totally unpredictable that could exceed their expectations. Now, during the Fate Karakura Town arc, when Aizen had told Ichigo that he had known about him since the moment that he was born, we are now able to understand what he had meant by this, because he was closely monitoring Masaki, the Quincy that he had ended up hollowifying. Aizen is intrigued to see what will happen after the hollow white ended up hollowifying a target that is the furthest away from itself. Now, we understand what he means by this when Urahara later explains that hollows are the opposite of humans, as well as hollows being poisonous to Quincy. When he explains to Isshin and Ryuken his method of saving Masaki, which is going to be very different to how he had saved the Vizards. Aizen had realized that his Hokyoku was incomplete after he had studied Urahara's research data that he had compiled for his own Hokyoku. Urahara had only ended up creating his Hokyoku in order to reverse the process of hollowification with the Vizards, but after having used it, he had wanted to get rid of it, so he had hid it within Rukia's Gigai. Aizen had eventually obtained the other Hokyoku from Rukia's body, thus combining it with his own in order to create a completed form of the magical wish-granting orb. Earlier, I had mentioned that the Hokyoku was created as a device to dissolve the boundary between Shinigami and hollows. However, its true ability is to sense the heart's desire of those around it and to materialize this desire, so it is pretty much a magical wish-granting orb. Now, I've explained the Hokyoku in such great detail because it too has the ability to hollowify a Shinigami. However, unlike the other methods of hollowification, the Hokyoku is able to create a flawless Shinigami hollow hybrid. Like I had mentioned earlier, Urahara had attempted to reverse the hollowification of the Vizards with his own Hokyoku, but unfortunately, because the device was incomplete at the time, he was only able to stabilize the transformation, thus turning his comrades into hollow Shinigami hybrids. But Urahara had wanted to completely undo what Aizen had done to them, but he was unable to, thus explaining why he thinks that he had failed the Vizards. While Urahara may think that he has failed them, without his help they would have never gained control over their inner hollow, and they would have ended up hollowifying, as well as dying if he hadn't used his solution to soul suicide, which he had combined with the Hokyoku in order to stabilize their souls. We also know that Aizen had used the Hokyoku to transform various classes of hollow into Arrancar. We know the definition of an Arrancar is a hollow that has acquired Shinigami powers, and most of the Espada were Vastor Lorde class hollow before Aizen had granted them with greater power via his Hokyoku and had allowed them to join his army. In addition to this, Aizen had supposedly used the Hokyoku to hollowify Tozen into a perfect hollow Shinigami hybrid. Now, this is very different to the Vizards and even to Ichigo, as Tozen had acquired a hollow mask as well as a resurrection which allowed him to transform into a complete hollow form that he he has full control over. We don't know much about this form, but we can appreciate that the Hokyoku played an important role in enhancing Tozen and evolving him from just an ordinary Shinigami. Now this is what horrifies Komamura, that Tozen would allow himself to fall so low and to become a monster all in the pursuit for greater power. Earlier I spoke about soul suicide, where the hollowified soul becomes so imbalanced that it self-destructs. In chapter 535, Urahara explains a solution to this fatal symptom of hollowification. He proposes that something opposite must be inserted into the individual soul in order to balance it and counteract the hollowification process, which we are aware disrupts the balance of the soul with the outside world. Urahara was able to prevent soul suicide with hollowified Shinigami and even hollowified Quincy. He had prevented the deaths of the Vizards after he had created a vaccine that had combined the spiritual pressure from a Quincy arrow and a human soul in order to restore the balance of the Vizard souls. Now this is easier to understand when you appreciate that hollows are the opposite of humans and Shinigami are the opposite of Quincy. So the Vizards were saved thanks to this vaccine that had introduced the conflicting aspects of hollow and Shinigami into their soul, thus restoring the balance and stopping the soul suicide in all of the Shinigami that Aizen had hollowified during the Turn Back the Pendulum arc. Now Urahara was also tasked with saving the life of Masaki by stopping her soul suicide after she was bitten by the Hollow White. Now she is a Quincy undergoing hollowification, so things are not as simple as before. Now like I have mentioned earlier, hollows are poisonous to a Quincy, so in theory hollowification should not even be possible with a Quincy because their soul will simply self-destruct. Urahara, being the genius that he is, ended up devising a method to stabilize a hollowified Quincy soul. He proposes that a special Gigai needs to be created from a human soul. Now this will house within it a Shinigami who will become a Shinigami human hybrid. Isshin agrees to become the opposite existence to Masaki, despite him losing all of his Shinigami powers and his ability to sense hollows while he remains within Urahara's special Gigai. Isshin becomes a living vaccine that is tethered to Masaki's soul. After he enters into her inner world and he ties her soul together with the hollow that is inside of her. Now as long as this hollow is tied to Masaki's soul, Isshin will not be able to leave his Gigai. I wanted to make a video on this topic because the anime is just about to adapt the Everything But the Rain flashback arc, and this topic can be rather confusing, with so many different characters and concepts being involved. I really wanted to shine a spotlight onto Urahara by appreciating just how much of an important role that he had played with damage controlling all of Aizen's experiments and his crimes. While the humble candy store owner may have appeared to be a very shady character at the start of the story, especially when we learned that he had concealed the Hokyoku within Rukia's Gigai, we do thankfully learn to appreciate and understand the reasoning behind all of Urahara's actions, because in all honesty he always had good intentions. He had helped everyone who was forcibly hollowified, and he was successful at this despite the fact that he considers himself to be a failure, as he was unable to completely reverse the hollowification in all of the instances. Now I have really loved diving deep into the intricate details of hollowification, as we understand the conflicting powers within the world of Bleach, as well as how big brain Urahara is to have come up with a plausible solution to this really frightening problem. Now let me know all of your thoughts about how hollowification works and how Urahara was able to help the victims of Aizen's experiments. If you want more videos like this, then definitely leave some suggestions in the comments for other topics for me to deep dive into. Also make sure you continue the discussion in the comments. I love reading all of your thoughts too. And lastly, thanks for making it to the end of this video, and I can't wait to see you in my next Bleach Explained video. If you enjoy my content, then you can support my channel through Patreon for as little as $1 a month, or even through YouTube by becoming a channel member. You will gain access to exclusive channel perks and a Discord server which I frequently use. So become a member of my Zero Division and be the first to know about my upcoming videos. And once again, thank you for sticking around till the end of the video, and whatever you contribute will mean a lot to me.